Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. We have been talking about the story of Idris alayhi salam, or Enoch. And we have talked about that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the knowledge of astronomy, gave him the knowledge of mathematics, and he used his knowledge of astronomy to do a lot of things. So some questions, I don't know, they probably came most probably from people who are not Muslims, that does Quran even talks about science? Well, not just science. Quran itself talks about over 40 different branches of education and studies that I have compiled a list of. There are, of course, far more different things that are being talked about in the Quran. The thing is this, that you'll be like, oh, you compile these lists now. Does Quran particularly state the names of these? Well, Quran talks about many things that we are still learning, or we have recently learned. So I'm pretty sure when somebody records this video in 100 years, we'll talk about a far greater list. And when it comes to the hadith, if you combine the Quran and the hadith, it's countless different venues or branches of knowledge we're talking about. For example, Quran talks about theology, which is in Arabic called ilm al-tawheed, oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Quran talks about pronunciations like ilm al-qira'ati wa tajweed, that how to properly recite, what are the rules and regulations earlier on, or talks about the rules of grammar and syntax. For those of you who are familiar with computer science or programming in particular, know the importance of syntax, that how important the syntax in order for the computer to understand and process anything, it needs to be written in a proper syntax for the compiler to be able to understand, or the interpreter to be able to understand it. So ilm al-nahv, and also ilm al-sarf, the morphology. We find this in Quran, the ilm al-tafsir, the exegesis. And we also have ilm al-lughah, the linguistics, ilm al-usul, the science of fundamentals. Similarly, ilm al-furu', ilm al-kalam. It is also an extremely important branch of knowledge, or ilm al-fiqh wal-qanun, the law and jurisprudence, or ilm al-fara'id wal-mirath, the law of inheritance. Ilm al-jarima, the criminology, the ilm al-harb, the science of war, ilm al-tarikh, history, ilm al-taskiyati wa-tasawwuf. We're talking about how you can do the cleansing of the human soul, or human desires must be streamlined to the correct path. The taskiyatun nafs, your inner self, how to fix your inner self. It talks about ilm al-ta'bir. It talks about ilm al-adab, the literature, ilm al-balaghat, ilm al-ma'ani, ilm al-bayan, ilm al-badi', the rhetoric, ilm al-jabri wal-muqabila. It talks about mathematics. It talks about ilm al-manadhira, the polemics. It talks about ilm al-falsafa, the philosophy. It talks about ilm al-nafsiyat, the psychology, ilm al-akhlaq, ethics. علم السياسة, political science, علم المعاشرة, sociology, علم الثقافة, culture, علم الخطاطي, calligraphy. It similarly talks about علم المعيشة والاقتصاد, اقتصادية, the economics, علم الكيمياء, chemistry, علم التبعيات, physics, علم الحياتيات, biology, علم النباتات, botany, علم الزراعة, the agriculture, the علم الحيوانات, zoology, علم طب, it talks about the medical science, ilm al-adwiya, pharmacology. Quran talks about gynecology. Quran talks about embryology, ilm al-janeen. Quran talks about ilm al-takhliqat, cosmology, the takhliqiyat, the entire universe, creation of the universe. Quran talks about ilm al-kawniyat, the cosmogony. It talks about ilm al-hayya, astronomy. علم الجغرافية, geography, علم الأرضيات, geology, علم الآثار, archaeology, علم الميقات, timekeeping. This is just a small list of the different areas Quran in particular talk about, and of course the list is far greater. I've only talked about a handful of things here. And again, as I said, bringing in hadith into this picture will of course greatly enhance the fields that the Islamic core of education, the Quran and the Hadith, talks about. And we talked about astronomy, the ilm al-hayya wal-falkiyat, that even Professor Hitti, in his work of History of the Arabs on pages 568 through 573 writes about that not only are most of the star, and he goes on, I'm just giving you the extractive names in the European languages of Arabic origins are there. In astronomy, and he's a great historian, and he wrote, but a numbers of technical terms are likewise of Arabic etymology and testify to the rich legacy of Islam to Christian Europe. And I can just go on and talk about the work of early Muslims in the time of the Abbasid Caliphate, like for example in the times of Khalifa Mamun al-Rashid, where we see great work done by some scientists like Averroes, who is Ibn Rushd, and Al-Batani, Al-Bayruni, and all of these people lived over 1,000 years ago. And we find observational astronomy, and it will going to be extremely shocking for some of you that the word almanac is actually an Arabic word, al-manakh, which is about the details of the weather. Subhanallah. I mean, there are books written on this subject matter by a gentleman by the name of Sheikh Abdurrahman al-Sufi. He wrote a book on this, Aswar al-Kawakib, means the figures of the stars. And Ibn Haytham, who is called Al-Hazan in the European world, in the Latin language, he's called Al-Hazan. His work on astronomy is great. And there's so many people that you will find, and we can basically talk about it some other time in a little bit more detail. But this is just the tip of the iceberg, the amount of information that you find. So it's extremely, I would say, lack of knowledge that somebody will depict by stating that, does Quran even talks about science? Does the Quran talks about cosmology? Does Quran talks about the creation of the universe? Quran talks about the creation of man in 7 different stages. It was not just like in one stage. At different places in the Quran, it talks about the different stages of the creation of the first human being. That's how much detail Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the creation of the human being. Not just talks about the creation of the jinns, but also talks about what kind of fire they have been created from. What is nar as-samum? Smokeless fire. I mean, Quran talks about a lot of details that unfortunately people have not understood or comprehended. And as the time is progressing, we are able to understand their meanings a little better than our forefathers did. And inshallah, with more advancements, we'll be able to understand it even better. So we can talk more about the different areas that Quran talks about, maybe some other time, but I just wanted to give you guys this heads up before we start diving back into the story of Enoch, as a lot of you on TikTok as well as on YouTube have asked that we should talk about some of the other details about from the life of the Enoch, as comes in the books like Al-Qasas al-Quran or Ard al-Quran and things of that nature. Inshallah, we're going to talk about it in the next part, but I just wanted to give you this information in today's video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and inshallah, we will be presenting to you a lot more videos. And of course, if you have any questions, make sure you put them out in the comment section below. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.